Hey friends, welcome again to the Winning Digital Customer Show. Today, we are going to talk about self-service, something which is so common today, we may take it for granted. But the truth is, self-service hasn't always been around. It's been massively enabled by digital, and customer expectations around self-service continue to grow and have grown significantly even just during the last 18 months. And it means that companies, even those with some substantial self-service capabilities, need to double down on those capabilities because many organizations offer self-service capabilities, but which are not comprehensive. I'm going to offer you some statistics to support this thesis over the next few minutes and make some suggestions as to what you should do about it. So let's get started. If you rewind 100 years back in the United States anyway, self-service was almost nowhere. If you went to the grocery store and you wanted something from the grocery store, you waited in line at a counter to tell the guy that you wanted a can of beans and you wanted some flour, and he went and got it for you, brought it to the front, charged you for it. You couldn't even self-service shop. The concept of the modern grocery store with aisles and carts hadn't yet been created. The idea that a customer would walk down aisles of merchandise, find what they want, and put it into their own shopping cart is an invention of the last 100 years. For a long time, other than the ability to shop for yourself in a grocery store, the best example of self-service when I was a kid was probably the ability to pump your own gas. I grew up in Chicago. Now I live in New Jersey. And even here in New Jersey, we're not allowed to pump our own gas. We only have full service gas here in New Jersey, and I think a couple other places in the country. But in most of the world, you can pump your own gas. And furthermore, massive growth over the last few decades. Now I can do most of my banking online. I can do most of my travel reservations online or via mobile in a self-service mode. And these things I can file a claim for my insurance, in a self-service mode. More and more capabilities and more sophisticated types of transactions are being enabled online. Let's just look at property and casualty insurance. I remember a time not that long ago, maybe 20 years ago, when I was working on insurance systems for a couple of the major carriers, and you could get a quote online for your insurance, enter your information, find out what, let's say, auto insurance would cost. But if you really wanted the policy, you still had to call, or you had to go into an office, you had to sign some forms, right? You couldn't complete the process. Then we got to a point a few years later where you actually could go online and not only get a quote, but completely sign up for your auto insurance. But if you had a claim, if you were in an accident, you really still had to go deal with human beings at the company. And today, property and casualty insurance companies are creating processes where you may have a claim where you need to do very little to no human interaction with anybody. And so every industry needs to be continuing to think about moving in this direction, more and more touchless. Now, why is that? Why is that so important? Well, there's a few reasons. The number one reason is customer expectations. One study by Business Wire in 2017 showed that 60% of consumers preferred digital self-service tools, especially for simpler inquiries. But that was a few years ago. A recent study by my friend Shep Hyken in his recently released report on customer service showed that, and he's been doing a study for years asking the same questions of a large sample group. 2021, 67% of consumers preferred using self-service tools before trying anything else in terms of contacting a company. And that number shot up from 67% to 71% just in the 1 year period between 2021 and 2022. So we are on a continuing growth curve in terms of customers' preferences to just deal with stuff themselves rather than dealing with a human being. And of course, most organizations in most situations are optimizing their ability to, cost effectively serve the customer by delivering self-service capabilities. It's almost always way cheaper to let a customer engage with an app or a website or another self-service tool than have a human being talk to them on the phone or deal with them in person or even deal with them by chat. Now, of course, it does cost money to create all these self-service tools, but 9 times out of 10, or I should probably even, roughly guess 99 times out of 100, the cost in the end, amortized over a couple of years, yields great savings in terms of the cost of ongoing customer interactions. And of course, if that were at the expense of delivering great customer service, then that would be a more sort of profound trade-off question. Do we want to save money by driving customers to self-service, possibly at the cost of the quality of the service? But what we're finding for many, if not most types of transactions and all types of customer segments is a vast preference for self-service options. So if you're giving the customer what they want and you're saving money, this kind of seems like a no-brainer. And in fact, it works. Another study from Zendesk showed that 69% of consumers that they studied were able to successfully resolve their issue independently on their first visit. Now, you could look at that 69% number a couple different ways. You could say that's a pretty high number. That sounds pretty good. But of course, it also represents 31% of customers. And this study was from 2020, but 31% of customers who were not successful at solving their problem independently. So the thing I'm trying to impress upon in these statistics here today is that it's not just some, but an overwhelming majority of your customers that are trying to solve their problems via self-service, and a level of success which is pretty high, which indicates the potential, and yet we're not at that 90%, 95% level, which means that with most organizations, there's a fair amount of headroom to continue to improve their self-service capabilities so that a higher and higher percentage of consumers or even business-to-business customers can solve those problems on their first try. And by the way, one of the reasons why this is essential, to not have people who are trying to go through the self-service channel at a certain point go, oh, okay, I guess I have to pick up the phone. I guess I have to go to the store. I guess I have to do something else to deal directly with the brand, human to human, because the self-service just isn't working. 42% of people surveyed in Shep Hyken's recent study said that they will switch if they're dissatisfied with a company's self-service options. So not only is this a preference for customers to deal with you in a way that costs you less if you don't provide it, if you make them go to your higher cost channel, they may leave and go to someone else who's dealing with them, ironically, in a less expensive way. So really, the data could not be more strong to underline why self-service needs to be a major focus for every brand. And by the way, I work with brands across a wide continuum of different customer types, but some of the brands that I work with are very high-end brands that are targeting high net worth customers. For example, financial advisory companies or jet companies making private jet aircraft, right? These are companies that are selling products that cost anywhere from tens of thousands of dollars a year to millions of dollars. And I can tell you from doing research with these customers, they are not different. They prefer, in most cases, a self-service channel as a first point of contact. Now, because they're in a luxury segment, they expect a really, really good self-service channel. And of course, on the occasion when they want to speak to a person, they also expect that option to be available. We'll talk about that in a minute. But don't think because you're dealing with a perhaps more affluent segment or a higher cost product that your customer prefers as a first point to be able to deal with you human to human. It's 9 times out of 10 not the case. And by the way, in another study by Mazov, 73% of customers prefer starting with a company's website, meaning in lieu of things like going to social media and having to post something on Twitter or even having to go to live chat. The first preference is to just be able to find what they want on the website. And just as another example, this is another study, this one done by ZoomShift, 65% of customers in 2021 said they prefer restaurants with self-service kiosks. Now, I'm assuming this is really focused on the lower end of the restaurant, quick service type restaurants, but they prefer to have the self-service kiosk in most cases for efficiency. And I did another one of these live casts a while back talking about the percentage of people in some quick service restaurants who are ordering on their mobile phones, paying on their mobile phones. I think I did another thing talking about sit-down restaurants, the ability to order at your seat. These are all examples of self-service. So if you have an experience where there's a one component of the experience which just it's very problematic to create self-service. Let's say it's a sit-down restaurant and you need at some point to bring your customers their food. So you're not necessarily trying to create a 100% self-service experience. Consider the scenario where if you're quick service, they may be ordering with kiosks. But if you're not, if you're a sit-down restaurant, they can be ordering on their phones. They can be paying on their phones instead of waiting around for your server to bring them their check, things like that. The opportunity to self-service to create convenience for the customers are significant. And you might think to yourself, yeah, but what about that human contact? Isn't something lost when they're not kibitzing with the server or they're not calling our call center and talking to our people or experiencing that, sense of personal warmth and connection in our stores? Well, I don't mean to be sarcastic or cynical about it, but the reality is that while there is a segment of people who, let's say, are lonely and want to call your call center and chat with somebody, it's a relatively small percentage of people. And in fact, most of your customers, and I dare say probably almost all of your best customers, they prefer efficiency. And in another study from Shep Hyken, 63% of customers said convenient customer service is more important than friendly customer service. Not that you shouldn't be friendly. And these numbers also continue to grow and have grown over the last number of years that these surveys have been conducted. But customers are much more about getting in and getting out and getting their problem solved as quickly as possible than having some kind of a friendly social experience. And the statistics support that. And when companies feel, when customers feel that companies are providing excellent customer service, that increases their trust in that company. And look at how this continues to grow. In 2021, 79% of people said that they have more trust in companies that provide excellent customer service, meaning they have more trust in the company financially. They have more trust that the products will be good, not just trust in the customer service. This is overall trust in the company. I had a funny interaction with my son the other day. He had a negative customer service experience with his cell phone company. I won't say who it is. And it colored his impression of the whole company. He said, this company, quote unquote, sucks. Despite the fact that he uses their mobile connectivity every single day, all day long, and generally speaking, has a good experience with it, gets coverage, high bandwidth, and he's done that for years. But he calls them, has a 10-minute conversation, is dissatisfactory, and it colors his whole trust of the brand. You'd think that, what about that 24/7 reliability that they've been providing, giving his cell phone access wherever he goes? Well, those small number of dissatisfactory customer experiences have a disproportionate impact on my son's perception of that one particular brand. And these statistics show that this is not just the quirkiness of my son, who is quirky in a number of ways, I'll grant you that, but it is actually common. And not only common, but growing. That percentage of people who say that they have more trust in companies that deliver excellent customer service has gone from 79% in 21 to 83% in 2022, 4%, kind of a gross increase. That's a pretty substantial difference, and I would say greater than the margin of error on a survey like this. So we see this as a growing trend. And of course, as we've said, if the other data points show us that one of the most important components of the perception of excellent customer service is self-service and the ability to have an excellent self-service experience, which is not only present, but allows you to resolve your issue quickly and easily without having to speak to a human being, you can see how this isn't just about quickly solving one little issue for a customer, but has a halo effect that affects their whole brand and their whole relationship with the brand. I want to end with just a couple of important nuances here. One is the priority of mobile. When asked, how important is it that you're able to complete comprehensive customer experience, support experiences on mobile? In 2021, 30% of people said that. And look at the jump to 2022. 1 year later, 43%. That's almost a 50% kind of net increase from 30% to 43%. Obviously 13, total gross percentage points over a 1 year period. Obviously that was a period of great change in digital transformation in the world, a period of COVID and the impact of COVID on people's lives. But it's still a huge, huge jump. And I want to actually highlight two components of this question: mobile and comprehensive. So clearly mobile, it's a mobile first world. And mobile has become the number one way that consumers engage with most digital properties. So you'll want to make sure that those customer support experiences are not only great, but they are great on mobile devices, which requires constant diligence because those mobile devices keep changing, new versions come out, new screen resolutions come out, et cetera. So that's absolutely critical. And I think there are a lot of companies out there, maybe some of you listening, that have worked to create good, solid web experiences, but they don't render that great on mobile. They're not as elegant on mobile. And that is something that needs to be dealt with. The second thing is comprehensive. If you look at the challenges or issues or problems that customers reach out to get service and support around, how many of them are actually enabled through your self-service? A common practice, and I remember years and years ago doing work with brands like Sears, going to their calls, this is 15, 20 years ago, looking at all their call center dispositions, all the reasons people called the call center and saying, okay, well, we're going to focus on the top ones. If 80% of your calls are for 20% of the reasons people call, and we're building self-service capabilities, it makes sense to focus on the 20% that delivers 80% of your calls if your goal is to save money, if your goal is to reduce the cost of the call center. And so very often that's what we did. And of course, that makes sense. That's where you start. It makes sense to prioritize when you begin, but just make sure you don't stop there. People expect comprehensive service, which means that, it's not only if you need one of the more common things. If you go on Amazon and you try to do a return, there's a whole bevy of different reasons for the return, including, the box was damaged. I got the wrong person's package. It's not just a simple, oh, you want to return it? You're dissatisfied. Here's what you do. They have anticipated in their self-service a wide range of possible use cases, some of which are not very common, but they're building all of that into self-service, I presume because they really want to avoid as much as possible the situation where someone says, oh, my situation is unusual, my situation is different or unique, I'm going to have to call. Mine can't be dealt with the kind of self-service experience that covers the 80%, or sorry, the 20% of situations that make up 80% of the calls. I'm in the long tail. So think about the idea of long tail customer service. It doesn't mean that you need to provide for every single completely obscure scenario, but those scenarios that come up regularly but just aren't the majority. Now that it's 2022, it's time to stop taking the 80-20 approach to customer service online and instead say, no, we need the 98.2% experience or something like that. In addition, that doesn't mean that it's not important to have human ways to elevate, to escalate. When the problem can't be solved, customers still absolutely expect the availability of some kind of live customer service support, some kind of live experience, so that if they run into problems, there is that safety net. There's websites wholly dedicated to those companies that try to hide their customer support numbers because they want to force everyone to self-service and they make it almost impossible to call them. That is not the answer. That is another point of major dissatisfaction with customers. And certainly to the point we talked about earlier about customers increasingly seeing the quality of customer service related to how much they trust the brand. When they want to speak to you, you don't want to be hiding. What you instead want to do is, as we've been discussing, make it unlikely that customer will need to speak to you directly, knowing that for the vast majority of those customers, their preference and their first attempt is going to be self-service. And if you provide them an excellent experience, they will rarely need to speak to you. But when they do need to speak to you, if it's the 98.2 rule, when that 2% occurs, it's very important that you're ready to go on that. And by the way, the more of those calls that you're getting to self-service, the more your live representatives are going to have time to speak to people who have those 2% type issues. And frankly, the more you'll be able to provide them your best call center representatives, because depending on the complexity of your business, it's tough to scale. It's tough to bring on new people who are really great. And if you can offload more of the day-to-day interactions, you can save the people who are really great for the people who need that specialized handing for something that's more out of the ordinary. So again, this is just another study from PwC. When something goes wrong, including wrong with your customer self-service tools, they want to speak to a human being. And there are other scenarios in which they want to speak to a human being as well. For example, when they feel like a situation is really, truly critical, they're ordering the flowers for their wedding and they have to be there tomorrow or it's going to be a disaster. Or they're stranded by the side of the road and they're scared and they're in a bad neighborhood. I mean, there are those types of situations where it's not even about the effectiveness of your self-service tools. They feel that they need a human voice on the other end of the phone. But again, very small percentage of situations. You just need to be prepared for them. The last thing I want to talk about is B2B. I just want to make the point that this is not a B2C situation. This is not a B2B acceleration. This is a this is not a B2C. Let me say that again. The point is that the trends that we're talking about today apply across B2C and B2B. 80%, according to Forrester, of the average B2B buying journey took place online in 2020. And no doubt that's grown since then. That just happens to be when the study is. Here's a comparison from McKinsey between August of 2020 and February of 2021, showing that the preference for digital self-service by B2B customers during the research stage of a purchase. And as I talked about earlier about large purchases, obviously some B2B purchases are small, but they tend to be much larger than your typical B2C purchase. The preference for digital self-service went from 22% to 34% between August of 2020 and February of 2021, less than a year. And again, that's a year during COVID. So it's like dog years, right? It counts as 7 years or something like that. I don't know. But the point is, all the things we've been talking about, the criticality of self-service, the growing criticality of self-service, the importance of that self-service being comprehensive, not just based on the 20% rule, continues to grow. The data supports that. And it's true, as you can see in the data, across both B2C and B2B. So that's what I want to emphasize for you today. Of course, many other pieces that we've put out from my company and from myself about how you go about this, how you do customer research, how you identify points of pain, how you develop digital products to make them better and better all the time, how you use the metrics to understand whether they're working, where they're not working. There's always some place you're letting the customer down, and to be on the constant hunt for those things, finding them and improving them. This is the key to delivering great digital customer experience. Of course, there's my book, Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance. I also frequently talk to leaders who've run successful digital transformations on my podcast, also called Winning Digital Customers. So I mentioned all that not as a commercial, but just I feel a little guilty because I'm leaving you with, this is why this is so important, but I haven't told you in the last 30 minutes what the heck to do about it. So I'm sorry about that. I could only pack so much into 30 minutes, but I just want to point out, I'm not going to feel so bad because I have provided many other places where you can go for that information. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or anywhere else. Howard Tiersky, I'm happy to answer any questions because I want to make sure that you're not just, having a fire lit under you around these types of data and these types of trends, but you have a clear path on what to do about it. So hopefully you do and you will, but if you need any help, feel free to reach out. In the meantime, thank you, as always, for watching the Winning Digital Customers show. I really appreciate your being here and for staying till the end. I'm Howard Tiersky. I look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, keep transforming.